It's working. Are we live? We are live. What is happening? Everybody, if everybody's having a fantastic whatever day you're watching this, let folks load up in here. This live chat is more a response to my own video about boost. I did a short live show the other day and was going over boost versus trying to build NA combinations. And I get it. There's a lot of guys out there that like the idea of a naturally aspirated combo. They view it as more simple, easier on the pocketbook. There's a bit more traditional maybe for some guys. There's some reasons to like a naturally aspirated combination. And, well, it sure as heck isn't the max amount of power you can get out of your engine. And I want to talk to you guys about the combinations that I know that work, but I also want to throw a caveat in here for you guys. There are extremely hard limits when you start playing around with naturally aspirated combinations as far as what will work on the street and what won't work on the street realistically. Because fellas, if you're building a race car, and what I mean by race car is a vehicle that is going to spend its time, not some on a dyno, grudge racing. You get the idea. Let's say you're building something for a naturally aspirated class of racing, or you're trying to go after guys on the street and your claim to fame is that you've got a fast NA combination. Whatever the case is, that is when you start talking about max effort NA combos, and that's when you don't care about all the fallibles that come with these real high-strung NA combinations. And by the way, if you're building this thing and you plan on putting it on the street, you're not building your NA combination the right way. I can promise you that. So, let's dive into this. First of all, the first combination that's going to come to mind for most people is going to be a 5.7. But which 5.7 are you talking about? Are you talking about the 5.7 that's in the cars with the intake manifold that is fixed, if you will, the more traditional? Or are you talking about the 5.7 that's in the pickup trucks with the variable runner intake manifold systems? Well, doesn't matter. Here's the thing. Put a cam in it, great, but make sure that you don't go too big. Cams that work really well are in Hemis. Cams that are around the 218 on the intake side and around 224 on the exhaust side with lobe separation angles of about 113 degrees. 112 would be a little bit better in my book. To give you a point of reference, the stock cam, if memory serves me correctly, is around 185, 190 on the intake side. Not much more than that on the exhaust, but it does have a 115 degree lobe separation angle. In this type of a situation, it's really not a bad camshaft. It just does not have enough duration to make power. Weirdly enough, though, they all still make about the same power on a dyno, so at least there's that. But the point is, small cam in that combination works really well. What about an intake manifold? For the cars, stick with the stock intake manifold. There are too many headaches trying to convert to a 6.4 liter intake manifold, which is a variable runner like the trucks have. To be honest, on the dyno, I've not seen that much of a difference between the two, even though they're rated significantly different one from the next. But even more to that point, the truck intake manifold or the 6.4 intake manifold doesn't represent a huge step up either way you want to try to play it. There's some anecdotes to, you know, it's better bottom end torque with the 6.4 manifold. Cheers if you've got it, and if you've got that result, more power to you. But I just would not spend the money and waste the time trying to make something like that work. It just, I haven't seen it really work, to be honest. Next, obviously long tube headers have got to come along with that. And an exhaust. Don't worry about a throttle body. The car can't even flow what comes from this factory stock. Put a Hellcat intake on it or a high flow filter in your truck airbox, and call it a day. If you want to really dive into this thing, pull that intake manifold off and have somebody, they'll call it porting. It's really blueprinting that intake manifold just to clean up any rough spots or something like that. And of course, the tune to go along with it. There's your fun little street combination. Throw some gears at it too if you choose. But for the trucks or for the cars, that's a pretty good combination to get you down the road with authority. It'll be a lot of fun and it'll sound pretty good too. Now, there's your happy place. And for the cars, yeah, basically that's a pretty generic 1170-ish combination. That's, yeah, as far as mile an hour goes, I don't know, 114-ish. I mean, it's up there. It's fast enough, okay? But here's the problem. You have to know that if you have a 5.7, there's your full stop. Don't try to go farther. Because if you do, well, you're going to start to encroach on 392 money. And the problem there is that nobody is going to care what you've done with this 5.7 once you start sinking that much more money into it. It's just not going to matter. You can go try to pick on scat packs if you like, but those guys, a lot of them really don't care. They see somebody that sunk a ton of money into a 5.7, they're cheering you on. So if you go out there with like a Napoleonic sense of revenge for the 5.7s, to the 6.4s, the 6.4 guys just go, good job. They'll cheer you on. There is no like weird 5.7 versus 6.4 mentality. But the thing about it is that you can build a 5.7 that'll out accelerate a 6.4. It's just you've got to put the work and the time into it. And by the way, I didn't mention that torque converter because, well, now we're going to start getting into what can make the car not all that much fun to have. I mean, I've talked about before the issues you can run in with NA combinations if you try to go too big. But here's the thing. When you're building an NA combination, well, let me just get to the 6.4s and then I'll get back to the reason why I said you're not doing it right. For the 6.4, leave everything alone on that car, put a small cam in it, say 224, 232, LSA of like 113, 114. By the way, lift in this case, it's kind of immaterial. These heads flow so much, even at low lift numbers, that it doesn't really matter too much. But again, yeah, somewhere around 600 lift for the 6.4, somewhere around 574 for the 5.7s. Yay, you're good. Anyway, there's your cam. Have it tuned. Of course, all cams are going to be locked out in these scenarios. Putting a gear in it, maybe not, a 370 gear. That cam's kind of small, but that would be about as big as I would put in a 6.4 before it's going to start nudging. A smaller cam, say around 224, 228, a little bit less of that exhaust side, will keep it a little bit happier, widen that thing out to 114, and you'll never know it's got a cam in it. It'll go, but it'll make about 40 or 50 more horsepower in general. Which will make it, in essence, what would be like an SAE rated 550-ish horsepower at the flywheel. Anyway, the point of all of this is those are the combinations that work. What happens, though, is that those are for street combinations, for something that's fun, something that's responsive, and that will keep at least a certain sense of stock drivability, reliability. It won't peel off. What the hell am I? Perform? It won't peel off a scab. In other words, that, oh my God, this thing is a pain in the ass. You won't maybe even notice it. It'll just sound good. But let me tell you where guys get it wrong. And where they get it wrong with NA application, they don't go far enough. This has been an argument that I've had with guys regularly with their NA builds. They'll talk about, I want a max effort cam. Okay. Talking about, let's say it's a 5.7. I want a max effort cam. I want an Edelbrock intake manifold. I want this, that, and whatever. Okay. But if you want this, that, and whatever, but you're not bumping up your compression ratio, you're not pulling the engine and putting a stroker crank pistons and rods in that thing, you're not bringing a max effort to the table. You want to go Eddie, or rather, yeah, you want to go that Edelbrock intake. Well, why not go with a short ram, a big cam, Jessel rockers, 14.5 or 15.5 to 1 compression ratio, and run it on ethanol? Why aren't you doing that? Like, so when guys start talking about, what naturally aspirated combinations, like, guys, the only naturally aspirated combinations that really do put out a lot more power than their stock variants are engines that are full builds. These are race combinations. You're not going to run this kind of stuff on the street. And you can say, well, I could build a 426, talking about maybe for a 392. I could build a 426 or a 440, run 13.5 to 1 with, a 230, 238 cam with, Pickett intake, the Edelbrock intake. You're like, yeah, you could, but here's the problem. That's not enough. That's really not going to get it done. What you really need to do is you need to be running about 14.5 to 1 compression ratio, a cam in the 250 on the intake side and 268 on the exhaust. You're going to want to run that at about 108 or 106 degree LSA with a high ram. And you're going to be running 2-inch long tube headers with an 18-inch extension. And they look at you like you're crazy. And I'm going, but you said you wanted max effort. This ain't even max effort. This is just a, like a 4 or 5 rep set type of an effort. Yeah, it's up there. But guys don't seem to want to really put these combinations together. They want a street combination. My response to that is, look, it doesn't matter if you've got a Coyote combination, an LS, Hemi, none of that matters. The reality is that if you want to build a badass NA combination, something that is really going to put you in the back of that seat, these are the combinations that you need to be thinking about. Because if you say, okay, well, I'm going to build, again, I'll use the 426. That's the one that comes up the most. I want to build a 426 stock intake with a small cam and obviously the headers and the tune and everything else to go along with it. I would say, okay, cool. Look to gain about 100 horsepower total, and it's going to give you power everywhere all the time. It is always going to be entertaining, and it is going to build torque basically like an impact wrench. It's just going to be all the time right now, no matter what. The guys that accept that type of a combination know what they're getting themselves into. They've got a car that's going to redline around 6,200 RPM, and it's going to run very consistently. It's going to be a lot of fun, and it's not going to be difficult to keep cool, which is another thing. A lot of guys like putting these combinations together, and they forget that you still have, well, the cooling system. You don't want to build something so nasty that you're taxing the cooling system, although modern cooling systems are really good. Just remember that if you try to make 440 cubic inches work in a small block, which is what the Hemi is technically, then you're going to have a lot of heat right next to some water jackets, and these things can cause all kinds of problems in a daily driven applications. Why, for me, I tell guys with a 392, the most I would go, frankly, for an NA is get your little 426 bug out of your system, but stick with that. Don't go bigger. For the 5.7 guys, you can stroke that thing out to about 408, 415 cubic inches if you want, but it's really not necessary. I would hold that thing around 392 cubic inches and let her rip. But again, when guys start talking about these max effort builds, for guys that are sitting in my chair, you kind of look at that and you just go, oh, really? So, and it goes even further for the guys that say, well, I don't want to run it on methanol. I don't want to run it on race gas. I want a pump gas combination, and I'm going to throw some spray at it. Because don't forget, NA doesn't just stand for naturally aspirated, it stands for nitrous assist, right? Or nitrously augmented. Anyway, in that case, please review to the first, I don't know, 15 minutes of this chat, and just hit this on rewind, because the reality is that if you want it to perform extremely well on dope, you've got to build the thing. You've got to overbuild and overport and overcam it to get it to work well on nitrous oxide. So you just want a little hit of giggle gas because it'll be fun. Okay, cool. But just know that once the novelty wears off, and this is the big thing, guys, once the novelty of the big cam, the high stall torque converter, once the novelty of that wears off, it becomes extremely annoying to have that car around. If it's a weekend car, okay, cool. And you take the thing to Cars and Coffee or a car show or something along those lines, and it gets oohs and ahs about the fact that it sounds good and it does, okay, Nino Mosquito. And but for the guy that's going to try to daily something like that, especially if you try to do it to a pickup truck, there's a fine line between something that is workable and passable and something that you just don't want to deal with anymore. And the problem is that fine line starts to creep. There's a lot of mission creep when it comes to where that line falls. When you first get started, you can't even see it. And the longer you have that vehicle, the closer that sucker gets. So just remember that you've got to live with whatever it is that you put together. Again, the other thing, and y'all have heard me say this time and time again, once you go down the route of naturally aspirated builds, that is the entire personality of that car. The issue that I have with NA builds for guys is that there's no getting around that vehicle having a cam. There's no getting around the way that that vehicle is going to drive with a very aggressive torque converter. Now, modern torque converters, admittedly, are way better than what they used to be in terms of drivability. But the fact of the matter still remains that they can be a little bit mushy at low speed, especially when you have a big cam where the car is just not making any power down low. People say, oh, just put a stroker in it. Okay, fine, true. But if you're putting a stroker in it, you're not putting that cam in it. And that's the big difference. So the basic bottom line is this. You want to build a naturally aspirated combination? Stay in the lines. Color inside the lines. Going outside of what is really in the whole world of building engines, a very mild combination, even a mild combination by today's standards still makes, if you're to put them on an engine dyno, over 500 horsepower. But it is what it is, right? Anywhere between 450 and 500 horsepower, whether it's a 5.7 or a 6.4, and up, right? Like 6.4 will make 550, 575 pretty easily if you're to put it in that environment. The point that I'm getting to is this, though. That's the happy place. That's where you want to stay. So again, camshaft 218, 220. Maybe 222 if you want to get a little bit racier on the 5.7 with a nice tight LSA. The 6.4 somewhere around 224 with on the intake side with an LSA around 113, 114. So a little bit less aggressive on the 6.4, but they come with a really wide LSA from the factory. So by comparison's sake, it's actually a lot more aggressive from where it started. Long tube headers and the rest, let it ride after that. Because what's the next step? Well, let's go through what the next step would be. The next step is going to be, again, Jessel rocker setup. Obviously bigger push rods, different valve springs, a completely different camshaft, completely different intake manifold. Your rotating assembly, you're going to want to be, like I was saying, somewhere around that 14:1 compression ratio, because you are no longer running this thing on gasoline. And race gas, you can probably drop it down to 13.5:1, but the idea is still the same. You are not going to be pump gas this thing anymore. It's not going to work out like that. And you're not going to be within the confines of normality when we're talking about RPM. To really make horsepower, well, the equation tells us we need RPM. And to be quite honest with you, if you want big horsepower out of any engine, you got to be able to turn it. And Hemis are good up to about 7,000 RPM. I don't like seeing guys take them much past that. There are some realities when it comes to the valve train geometry in these Hemis, which do not lend themselves very well to high RPM. You're going to have to run some very serious push rods, and like a 3/8 inch push rod with a 100,000th wall thickness. You're going to have a lot to have to deal with. A lot of valve spring. These valves are big, so there's just a lot more that goes into it that you got to think about. But again, it's got to be able to manage RPM on the big end, and that is where a lot of guys just don't want to go. They don't want to draw the line, which is interesting to me because again, these guys go max build. I want all the sauce, and then you tell them what they're really up against, and they just reel in real quick. So, but again, record-setting combinations aren't meant to last more than just a few passes in some cases without a complete rebuild. A 454 cubic inch stroker with about 14.5 or 15.5 to 1 running on methanol, that's going to be a little bit different combination than something that you're just going to go to your local cigarette shop and pump gas into your car or truck. There are levels to this game. And the problem is that some of these guys will street these crazy race combinations if they're trying to troll guys at, on a business park NA hit. But again, when we're talking about NA, it's not just the engine, it's the rest of the car that comes along with it. You want your NA car to be quick, right? Well, start cutting weight. Now this applies to everything, but if you want that thing to be fast, you've got to start gutting weight. And I mean, there ain't nothing wrong with it. You can still drive the thing on the street, right? It's got a VIN tag, it's insured, it's registered. Why couldn't you drive it around with one seat and nothing but a steering wheel, a shifter, a gas pedal, and a brake pedal, and a clutch if it's a manual transmission car? Plenty of guys do that now. And again, for me, I don't see a problem with that. It's there to be removed as far as a lot of folks are concerned. And when you get to that point, it's race car. It's not street car. But it's a street car because it's got the VIN tag and it's registered and it's insured and all the other stuff, right? So anyway, don't get mad at the guy that race preps his car. Don't get mad at the guy that takes the time to go the extra mile. They're just more dedicated. And these are the guys that will build a nasty 400 and some odd cubic inch Hemi and get out there and run some insanely stupid numbers with it. Yeah, they do that. Trucks and cars alike. And it's no more prevalent than it is with the trucks, by the way. Trucks have got a freaking stranglehold on naturally aspirated records right now. So, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But I guess the point is this. What's the best naturally aspirated combination? Say it with me. Stock. That's your best naturally aspirated combination. These modern engines make a whole lot of power for what they are. They are not anywhere near your dad's, your granddad's, your great-granddad's small block Chevrolet or small block Mopar. Those engines and a modern 5.7 Hemi have absolutely nothing in common. I mean, yeah, they're V8s and they do that thing. But realistically, they have nothing in common. The engine that you have in your 5.7 liter Challenger at 400, call it 400 horsepower. I know what it's rated at. That's bullshit. It's a 400 horsepower, 350 cubic inch engine, okay, for just conversation purposes. Do you realize that one of the all-time most killer crate motors was one of the 400 cubic inch, 355 cubic inch, I should say, crate motors from Chevrolet. Like, that thing found its way into everything, and everybody considered that to just be the cream of the crop when it came to a small block performance aftermarket solution. And it was about 400 to 420 horsepower and 10.5 to 1 compression. Keep in mind, this is on an engine dyno with nothing but a set of long tube headers. So in reality, it's probably more like 370, 380 horsepower net rated as opposed to 400 or 420 horsepower gross. See where I'm going with this? So the engine that's in your car now is already a high performance engine by any measure that you can come up with. And you can say, well, it's just really a camshaft away from bumping up another 30 or 40 horsepower. And if you were to put it on an engine dyno, it would be sitting at about 440 horsepower gross, give or take. So what more can you ask for from any other generation? These engines are insanity. So there's that, right? But anyway, let me check in with you guys, find out what y'all are chatting about, but let me dig in here. And if you guys are putting together an NA combo, let us know. Unburdened is in. What is up? Lime is in. How's it going, Professor B? Going well. Skid saying, sup, B? Oh, he's got the cadence. With the flex and the ball guy with the shade. Sovereign coming in a close second. Ryan's in. Good evening. So you're saying the answer is RT57, gearing 6-speed, intake, long tubes, and a tune. I agree. Then Burn saying, my claim to fame is my car always runs. Yes. Skid saying, maybe a Pro Charger? Always yes on that. Oh, and a tire. Almost forgot. Well, there is that. Ryan saying a Whipple 3-liter 5.7 or 6.4 would be enough for me on the street. Yeah, the Whipple 3 is pretty good. I would personally probably go IHI. The Whip's had a little bit of a problem, from what I understand, with reliability. Unbird say there's more to driving than quarter-mile straight line, but it's my favorite. I agree. Skid saying, how's everybody feeling tonight? Hit that like button. I like it. Here we go. Skid's Ford F-150 4x4 Super Cab 5.0 Whipple for the win. Okay, Skid, so check this out. Depending on how this year finds itself, I am having a really difficult time not pulling the trigger on a supercharger for that truck. I am not kidding. The more I think about it, the more I kind of want to do it. But it probably wouldn't be the whip kit, although it is arguably the nastiest of the group. I'd probably still go with the Maggie just because warranty. I just don't want to be turning the whip that hard, although I really wouldn't be turning it that hard. It's a 3-liter on a 5-liter engine. But anyway, yeah, that is just such a cherry little combination, especially for the street. Right, Whipple on anything for the win. Yep. So he's saying can't turn the wick up on the Hemis, just the 6.2. You know, in a way, you're right. One of the issues that a lot of guys seem to have is that you run into a bit of a glass ceiling with the 6.4, and that's mainly because the transmission is more the holdup than anything else. But in terms of just throwing boost at it and getting out, having fun, and you're not taking it to the drag strip, it's not going to be on a tire. I mean, you can throw 7 pounds of boost at it, make 530, 550 to the rear wheels on a Mustang dyno, and that's plenty. I mean, that puts you at Hellcat power basically, and you can just have fun. Have a fun car. Stuart, how about a stroker NA? That is an option. I will just say this though: once you start going stroker NA, you have to be committed to that NA life, right? Because if you go stroker NA, what do you do about compression ratio? Do you stop it at 11-to-1? Do you really want to get froggy with it and maybe creep it up to, say, and run it on E85 and run, say, 13.5-to-1? That's an option. Maybe even 14-to-1. When you start talking about stroker kits, again, you are committing yourself and your pocketbook long term to an outcome that, in terms of cost, now you're really getting close to what it's going to be to just put, an E-Force like the little Maggie 2650, which is a hell of a supercharger. A lot of cars run 9s with Maggies. But you're getting very close to running those kind of numbers in terms of dollar bills. And remember, if you've got a supercharged car, you can always take the supercharger off the car. If you needed to sell it, you wanted to go a different way with your vehicle, the build, whatever, there's always that option for you. And you've got to remember that that option cannot be exercised if you've got a stroker, cam, this, that, and everything else. Somebody's going to have to want a stroker Challenger. Now listen, I get it. There's a seat for every ass and an ass for every seat. I'm not saying you'll never sell it. You'll sell it. It's just that you're not going to realize any return on investment, so to speak, with that kind of combination. Deadpool, yes. Very great flicks. Stuart, at the drag strip, I see a lot of max effort NA cars that have a plastic carb air enclosure, and usually they're pulled off a trailer. Very true. Stuart, from a few years live, what is a Warlock cam? The Warlock grind is just one of my, one of the many grinds that I had put together. And that one, if I remember correctly, was for... I'd have to go back and look because there's a ton of grinds, but the Warlock, I believe, was a cam more set up for boost than anything else, if I remember correctly. But all of those bigger cams sound pretty good. Stuart, 69Z28 motor was a 392, that's or 302. That is correct. Well, it was an optional, but yeah, you had the 302, which was to homologate that engine for SCCA racing. Best years ever. Slack, thank you very much. Saying 377 horsepower wheel, 421 torque on an 0957 with the TSP Stage 2 cam with 3000 Circle D, which is the only way to go. Stock Nag 1. Thank you for not trying to put an 8-speed in it. Went out after the dyno. I have a Paramount Nag 1, Stage 1 trans now. Could have got a Pro Charger. Yeah, and that's the... talking about the money that you spend, right? And again, thank you very much. Like, I appreciate it. Yeah, no, they're fun combinations. The thing about the NA combos, if they're done right for the street, if you don't go too dumb, and again, Slack stuck with the TSP Stage 2, good. 3000 Circle D, very good. Sticking with the Nag 1, very nice. It's a fun, solid street combination. The area where guys really screw up is they will throw way too much cam at the combination. They'll forget that you have to run a torque converter with this way too much cam that you've thrown at it. Whoever is tuning it has no background in tuning cammed Hemis, which is a bit of a problem because Hemis can be a little bit unique to tune. The guys that can figure it out are also the same guys that have tuned heavily ported LS3 heads on 6.0 combinations. It'll let you know what kind of headaches you're about to fall into in terms of airflow at low speeds. But the guys that get into a mess, that's what happens. And again, it's not building it the right way, building it the wrong way. And then next thing you know, you basically spent quite a few $1,000s for a pretty significant pain in the arse. So, but thank you very much, Slack. I appreciate it. Sounds like a fun combination that you've got there. Oh, what I missed, guys? Michelle, I believe I'm saying that right. Hopefully I am. I heard long tubes are mostly useless if I'm not camming my 5.7, so I think I'll end up getting the 392. Okay, so on a 5.7, long tubes are actually not a bad idea. The 5.7 has a tighter lobe separation angle in the cam. It's 115 degrees. So it's not bad. It will actually respond to a set of long tube headers, especially when you consider it's got a log manifold from the factory. So anything is better. But on that car, it's not bad. On the 392, it doesn't do you any good to have long tubes. You need a short tube header with a cam with a wide 121 degree lobe separation angle that car comes with. Long tube is not what you're looking for. You need a short tube for that type of camshaft because you need instant dump of pressure coming out of that tube to help with any possible scavenging. That's why what you'll end up seeing with a 392 is you'll see them pick up torque because there's literally more tick-tock time at low RPM for scavenging to take place. Whereas on the big end, there's less, and you actually can, because of how long tubes work, lose a little bit of horsepower, not by much, a few points, but still you are not going to gain necessarily power with the long tubes over the shorties, especially if you compare tuned car to tuned car, you might be surprised that there's not that much of a difference with the 392, but with a 5.7 there is. That being said, I would never talk you out of putting a set of 6.4 or the same things on the Hellcats. Manifolds on it, shorty headers. The reason why I wouldn't talk you out of it is because they work great from a packaging standpoint. So from that point of view, they're great. Now, yeah, you're going to lose some power up to say about 4,200 RPM, but I mean, who cares? Run what you got, right? Plus, they're a lot less expensive. Sorry, the Shelby Daytona Coupe had a lowly old 289. Well, the 289 cars would struggle to get to 200 miles an hour. The 427 cars would actually kind of struggle there too. But at least the 289 cars would finish the race. There's a fun, because the 289 realistically was about a 510, 515 horse engine. But the funny thing is that all of the Shelby cars with the 427, they've got a lot more DNFs, which did not finish. But yeah, they were all really good. Those are awesome cars. Duke's saying long tubes are worth it from the sound alone. They do sound good. So you're asking, is the 228, 236, 114 too much for a 6.4? It's one tick over what I would put in one. I would go 226, 232 would be about as much as you're really going to use in a 6.4. And not run into some drivability issues. It's not, again, there's shades of gray when it comes to this. But for me, and something that I would personally have, 228, 236, well, okay, lobe design plays into this a ton, okay? So it depends on who the grind is from and what lobe profile they're using. If that was a comp, and it was like any of the, well, all of them are HRs. So if it's from comp or TSP, I would say that would be a pretty big cam. If it's from like Lunati or something like that, that if I'm not mistaken has a little bit different, kind of an older school cam lobe profile, it might be okay. But if it's a comp grind, that's going to be a pretty healthy cam, like a real healthy cam. There's going to be a lot of under the curve, as we say, lift. It's not too much, but it's almost too much. You know, I'll tell you what, in looking at that 228, 236, 114, where's the lobe center on the intake center line? You're probably looking at probably 110 degree ISL or ISL, intake center line on that. I'm looking at the LSA and my brain being what it does kind of scrambled it. So you would, yeah, as long as it's on a +4, like 228, 236, 114 on a +4, which would put it on an intake center line of 110. That's all. And by the way, so you guys know what that means. Is it an advanced cam? Is it retarded cam? Look at the lobe separation angle, and think of the lobe separation angle as the intake center line for the lobe. If they say it's well, in this case it's 228 236 with a 114 LSA. If they say if it's +5, then that means that the intake center line is at in this case it'd be a +5 would be 109 degrees. So this one would be +4 would put you at 110, which is what I would want to see. 109 is good too. I'd rather see it on a 228 at a 109 if you can get away with it. But a 110 would be okay. The thing you just don't want to see is like a 112. The further retarded the cam is, the lazier it'll be down low. Plus, it'll try to push power further out. And on a 114, it's already kind of a wide LSA. The only time you want a cam with like an intake center line somewhere around, say, 112-ish degrees is if you've got a cam that's checking in at like 110 or 108 degree in lobe separation angle. Sovereign, yeah, the Daytonas sound good. Though, you know, those 289s would spend about 8,000 RPM. They had a lot of over rev. Max asking, can we circle back to why the trucks are on fire when it comes to speed and power right now? Let me a regular cab, anything. So trucks are easy to remove weight from because everything just kind of bolts onto a truck. So you start pulling off things like the floor of the bed, the tailgate, the trailer hitch, the spare tire, the jack, just start pulling stuff off the truck because again, it just everything bolts out and it's super easy to remove weight from them. So there's one reason right there alone. Two, they come with aggressive gearing. So I mean, they come from the factory with either 321 or 392 gearing, which helps out a lot. But even more to the point, it's a solid rear axle and they plant the power very well. So between the fact that you can pull a ton of weight out of them without really altering much about the truck to begin with, and then again, add to that, it's got a solid rear axle and a really good flowing exhaust system. When you get the big Y pipe and everything else, it just does really well. So that's why. And a lot of the guys that are into trucks are really into drag racing. Stuart said, get the Maggie. I got a crush on that blower. It's awesome. So I'm saying 500 is a good number. 500 is a great number. Mesh is saying next year I'll do a Hellcat blower for my Durango RT. Nothing wrong with that. And again, Slack, thank you very much. 500 ponies. Oh, yeah. Oh, Sovereign. Well, yeah. I actually worked closely. So Superformance is a company that was a vendor of Shelby America. And I came really close to getting one of their Daytona coupes. Now, the Daytona coupe from Superformance is built off the original Bucks that car was made from. I drove one of those with a 408 cubic inch Roush small block. And this is at the same time when I had my 97 Viper that I was really getting into closed circuit racing, was doing a lot of roll racing with that car, drag racing, you name it. But at that time, Superformance, they had some issues with chassis design, and they had a little bit too much flex in the original Daytonas, and they cleared it up after about the second year of production. But I was able to drive one and spend quite a bit of time with that car with a 408 Roush motor making about 500. If you were to put it on a dyno, it'd be making about 550 horsepower. So spent a lot of time with that car out in Louisiana. Hard Rock is in. So Honestly, I don't mind if it's a kit, AC 427 or Daytona, because they still look badass and you can actually drive them. So here's the thing, they're really not kit cars anymore. These are full on component built, user built cars. I mean, you don't want to give them the connotation of being just a kit car. Some of these are better than the original. And there's no mistaking that anything that comes out of Factory 5, which has, that dude's got a hell of a racing pedigree. Superformance, which again was, and I think still is, a vendor to Shelby America. In fact, Superformance was the only company that could use the Shelby name at one point. Maybe still is. You had... that's a South African company. ERA is another one that put together really good cars, but a lot of these things come built. You just need to tell them what engine you want in it, or you would go through an authorized builder and you say, okay, I want the Roush 408, or I want, say, I want a even better. I think they had a 377 cubic inch stroker that was actually pretty sick. It had a nasty RPM range to it. Anyway, we're kind of going back in time here with some of the old AFR combinations, but and carbureted combinations too at that. But these were cars that were absolutely no joke. But yeah, they were and are. Still are to this day. I mean, if you're going to build something, you cannot go wrong with some of these modern component cars. And especially now with so many of them having, air conditioning, all the comforts of any other modern vehicle, it's pretty compelling how good they are. So, Duke's asking, are you familiar with FRP cams? Thoughts on potentially pairing a Tomahawk with my 391? I'm not. The Tomahawks, I think, are kind of a smaller cam, but it's my understanding a lot of guys have had some pretty decent results with that cam. So I don't see. I mean, look. Let me put it to you like this. There's a reason why I'm able to just rattle off these numbers. Guys, I've been speccing cams for Hemis for years. Hundreds of them. I've worked with shops all over the place, putting cams together for them. I've worked with racers. You guys know that Demonology has got one of my cams in the Black Ghost. You've seen what kind of work that car's putting in, especially with the new turbo setup. So I've done this for a hot minute, and everybody's looked up everybody else's skirt at this stage of the game. I can tell you that as long as the cam falls within that recipe that I was telling you about, you'll be in great shape. Don't worry about it. And it almost doesn't matter really where it comes from. Some of the older grinds, just do me this favor. Look at your lobe separation angle, okay? And if nothing else, do me this favor. Do not put a cam in that car with an LSA greater than 114. That's it. If it's 114, 113, 112, you're going to be fine. Don't worry about the duration numbers, because as long as they're, say, 220 and above on the intake and, say, 228-ish on the exhaust somewhere, 226 to 232, you're fine. You're good. You're golden. You don't have nothing to worry about. The car's going to run great. Do not try to slide rule. Well, the square of the hypotenuse divided by the... Don't get into that. Don't try to get the nerd thing going. If it's in that range, it's a great street cam and you'll do well. And that's for the 392 and the 5.7, by the way. The 5.7, air on the side is smaller. 392, air on the side a little bit bigger. Then that range I just gave you, you'll be 2 thumbs up. Don't sweat it. Stuart, thank you very much. Any Malaise era Mopars that are desirable? You're damn right there are, brother. So Aspens, Magnums, I love those cars. Look for an Aspen RT. Look for any of the Magnums are going to be good. The Valera, which is kind of an offshoot, is also going to be really good. Obviously, the dart. There's some darts that do fall into that era. The big chin cars, the cars with the big bumpers. I love I like all of those cars. I'm kind of a Malaise era guy. Matter of fact, believe it or not, the frowny face Challenger could be considered to be a Malaise era Challenger. People forget that that car was still made until 1974. And that puts you square in the middle of, the beginnings, the ripe part of the Malaise era. So, yeah, I mean, those are some really good places to start. You know what's messed up too? That was funny. The Malaise era Challengers, they used to be, oh my gosh, those cars were cheap. Oh my God. You couldn't give, and one of my favorite Challengers are the frowny face Challengers. I know everybody goes gaga over the 70 and 71. I'm more of a like 72 through 74 guy. But I kid you not, could not give one of those cars away at one point. And then people started buying them up to do Vanishing Point recreations out of them. So, you'd see a bunch of 73, 74 Challengers get bought up and they put the grills in from the 70 or 71 Challenger, and they put the fenders on them with the gills and whatever else they did with them. Anyway, they would make them look like that car, but you could get them for, I mean, you could drive down the road and people would have them sitting outside like for sale, a 6-pack of beer and a hamburger, and you could probably drive off with it. And for pretty good reason, because they were rust buckets. The cars from that era, all of the muscle car cars suffer from the same thing. I mean, you're gonna have quarter panel replacement, and what ends up happening is they just turn into Bondo jobs, man, just mud buckets. And so that's why a lot of folks would steer clear, especially of the Mopars, because they didn't have amazing quality control when it comes to, well, rust prevention and where moisture would end up, especially in cars from the Northeast, man. Those things were rough, real rough. But yeah, those are the Malaise era stuff, man. I love Malaise era cars. I think that they're great. I think that they're great in the same way that I like Cougars more than Mustangs. I like Challengers more than Cudas. I've always been more into the a little bit bigger body car, like the Mopars. Mopar for me is a B body or even a C body. I like the little stuff too, don't get me wrong, but I don't think, like, I think of an AMC Javelin before I think of a Camaro. All right, that's the way my brain kind of works. So, just because it's something different, again, by comparison, it's a novel experience, and I'm kind of a novel experience kind of guy anyway. So, that's why I like the kind of the oddball cars sometimes. But yeah, the RT Aspen, if you can find one, and you also had the Dusters would float around in that same space as well. But see if you can find an Aspen, because nothing is more Malaise than the name Aspen anyway. I mean, look, seriously, what do you think of when you hear the word Aspen? Right? White dude, white chick, the weird sweater, right? The hair, probably smoking a cigarette that's about that long. Some kind of psychedelic paired with hard liquor and Molson Golden lager, or something along those lines. There's going to be some narcotics involved, obviously, because it's Aspen and it's the Malaise era. I mean, it's a good hot tubs. It's a good time, man. Like when I see an Aspen, that's what I'm thinking about. You know the sweater I'm talking about too, the one that looks like the towels that were on your grandma's refrigerator. That, the brown and the tan. That's what's up, dude. I think, damn, that car would be sick to death with like any of the Hemi with a Nag 1 repower. Kind of a stock look, but with widened steelies with poverty caps, dude, that would be ridiculously sweet. So yeah, I'm definitely cool with an Aspen. Anyway, where was I at now? Sorry, it must have been my vacation last year. Let's see. Where was I? Where was I? Oh, get back to you guys. Robert Downey Jr., right? It's +3 and it's Skog and Dickey's part center cam. They did a 392 cam shootout. Cool. Never go full retard. Yeah, I mean, I didn't see their 392 cam shootout, but I'm sure it did fine. Like I say, all those cams fall in the same range. So if you like what you saw in that cam shootout, throw it in your car and let it rip. I'm saying be careful what you wish for as far as power goes. I have a Hellcat, which I do love to drive, but I certainly miss my 392 TA. A lot of times I do miss my 392. I had an SRT that I really shouldn't have gotten rid of. Like really, really shouldn't have gotten rid of. Yeah, Sovereign just jumped in. Yep. 392 car is just perfect car. You can't ask for more fun. True that. I was like saying, Graveyard Cars have been putting 392s in some original Mopar builds like Roadrunners. We did the last one I remember we did a 70 Roadrunner. It's a 70 Roadrunner with a 392 with a 6-speed. And that one, the cam I put in it was a... It was a 226, 234 on 112 degree LSA. That car sounded really good. It made pretty good power too. Oh, Sovereign's liking the 392. Yep. Sovereign's asking, can a Daytona be a practical daily driver? Define practical, but yes, of course. Sovereign, how does Superformance and Factory 5 differ? Superformance is more, I would say, more true to the original in terms of the actual body dimensions, the suspension, geometry. I think that Superformance qualifies, I might be wrong about this, I might not be. This is sticking out in my head that Superformance cars qualify as vintage for actual vintage racing events, where I don't think Factory 5 does. But Factory 5 has got better geometry for actual driving of a car, you know? So that's my understanding of how they differ, though. I'm saying my wife had a 392 Daytona, and that's what she did. She daily drove the car, and she loved it. That's an awesome car. So I'm saying smash the like button. Twin tubas. They make some serious music. They do. Eric is in. Good evening, Eric. Hopefully things are going well. And again, Stuart, thank you very much. It's good saying, hey, Eric, Tomahawk is pretty big for a 5.7, right? On a 113+2. Throw up the specs. Like I say, it's been a while since I don't know everybody's cam specs by heart. I do know that guys have run that, and I don't know of anybody that has complained about it. 113+2 puts you at a 111. It's not bad. It's just the other side of what I'd like to see him land on a 110, but there is no right answer. Oh, and that's the other thing. There's no such thing as a right answer when it comes to camshafts. Okay? There's simply not. There are so many different ways to get to the same place when you're talking camshafts that when folks go, well, this cam is better than that cam, which is better, it turns into a game of rock, paper, scissors. Guys, I've been doing this for way, way, way too long. I've seen way too many combinations get run, and it all turns into gray to me. Nothing, there are very, 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 very few standouts when it comes to camshafts. And I will take it a step farther. In a lot of those cases, the engine is a fresh build and it's built around a specific mindset. We're building this car for this purpose. Here are the components that are going along with it, all the supporting mods, the headers, the throttle body, the intake manifold, the exhaust system, everything it's a complete build. So guys will say, well, I put this cam into this car and it did X. And somebody goes, I put that same cam in my car and it was bullshit. Okay, well, the guy that had really good results, it's not because the cam was any different. The CNC machine doesn't know what it's cutting. But the other guy simply didn't have the same components that the other dude did. Or the big twist on this is who tuned it. Because that car will only be as good as whoever is tuning it. And I mean, this ain't a situation where, I mean, unless somebody has got a ton of experience with that particular exact combination, you're not going to get just like a canned tune that's going to work with that. That's not, that ain't how this works. Matter of fact, take it a step further at Peitz, that's P-E-I-T-Z, every car gets a dyno tune because every single one of the cars, even when they have the same components in them, are a little bit different. You'd be surprised. You'd be real surprised how a little bit different they are. Now, it's not big differences, but to get to the same result, even because of manufacturing tolerances, you got to add a little bit more timing, take a little bit of timing out. This car, for whatever reason, had to have more timing. This other car was cool without it. Again, there are so many little minute things that can be different that when you add it all up together, it's a significant change. So again, stick within the parameters. Again, mid 220s and mid 230s on the exhaust, mid 220s on intake, mid 230s on the exhaust, 113 to 114 LSA, 112 if it's a smaller duration on a 5.7, maybe. They're all going to put out about the same power numbers. They're roughly the same grind, roughly the same heads, roughly. They're all going to put out basically roughly the same kind of numbers. 111 plus 2 for the Tomahawk. So 109, that's more like it. Lime saying, hello, Eric. Already saying darts are sick. They were quick from the factory and can be turned into little beasts. There's a little black one that runs around over here that I would like to get my hands on. Just not enough time, not enough money, and I don't know. You always need more of both. Start saying 71 vanishing point. Yep. Kowalski. Yep. That was a 440 car, as a matter of fact. 68 A12, that's a good car. Real good car. Would give any Hemi a definite run for its money, especially through the 1,000-foot mark. 71 Duster with a 340 is good. B-body Charger is sexy. Of course it is. Eric's checking in with Sovereign. Sovereign's liking the 68. I am a big 68 fan when it comes to B-bodies. 68 and 70. The 69 year, for whatever reason, it's kind of a swing and a miss for me. So I'm saying I need an Aspen because I have a headache. Excuse me. 2024 will go down as the worst year of Charger, beating out the 80s four-bangers. Those were kind of funny. I still can't believe they put that name on that car. Ryan, yeah, 68 to 70 satellites. So you know what's funny? A very young version of the bald fella you're hearing talking to you. Satellites were also, it could be considered a really good Malaise era car too. I'm glad you brought that up. It's a B-body. But the funny thing about the satellite, I wanted a satellite so bad I couldn't see straight when I was a kid. And I wanted to build a Max Wedge 440. And for me, I thought that would be just the ultimate, is to have a Max Wedge 440 and a satellite. But you know, it's one of those things where I was very young, but my granddad liked those guys. In fact, that was his suggestion. Skids, are there any cheap classics left? No. Eric's hanging out with Ryan. There's nothing inexpensive anymore. 440 sound good. 440 sound real good. Sovereign's liking the 68, 69 B-body Cornet. Sam's asking, would it be worth getting a 5.9 Magnum and throwing a cam in it? I mean, it's not really. The 5.9 Magnum's claim to fame is that they just run indefinitely. Change the oil when it feels right. That thing will just keep running. To cam or not to cam? That is a question. Well, whether it is nobler in the whatever it is, I can't remember any of that. Ryan's liking the 69 B bodies. Yep. Yeah, the last of the B bodies, you know, the muscle car era cars were pretty nice. Yeah, Eric, man, I tell you what, dude, I'm right there with you. I would love to see something. Well, but there's no V8 to go along with it, so unfortunately, we just don't have anything to be able to put into those cars. And I still think that Dodge screwed up when they didn't build the engine. They didn't give us that 4-valve engine that we were supposed to get. So this kid's an 81 D100 with a 6.4 slap, and the guy wanted 25 grand. Yeah, I don't even, you know, guys, I hate to say this, I don't even mess with classics anymore. I don't even think about them. I hate to say it, but so many people are getting screwed over by car flippers when it comes to classics, and I don't know, man. I got a weird taste in my mouth with that. Luckily, the stuff I've been around has all been super clean, but I've heard some horror stories coming from some of these guys. And golly, I mean, just tons of Bondo, tons of frame rot. I mean, these things, they're a lot of the classics, unless you inspect it, have a independent inspector go over this thing with a fine-tooth comb, a hammer, a nail, everything, check everything out, magnets, the whole bit. You would be shocked to know what passes for sellable when it comes to classic cars. It's bad, man. It's really bad. Whatever happened to the Plymouth Scant? Who knows? Oh, dude, yeah, I looked it up. 228, 238 on a 111 with a 109 intake center line for the new Tomahawk 2.0. That'd be a lot of cam on a 111, unless it's got a little bit shallower mid lift numbers out of that lobe. That would be a pretty healthy cam. I would definitely not put that in a 5.7. 220, 228, that's familiar. 113 plus 2, that's real familiar for me for the Mark 82. That makes for a really good centrifugal supercharger cam, by the way. Oop, Eric's hanging out with Sovereign. Skids. Yeah, Eric does need to be the next CEO. 440 Magnum Alpine White. Yep. Yeah, Eric for president. Oh, Sam, low mall 99 with a 5.9 and a 5-speed. Again, it's a workhorse of an engine. A cam is not going to be the saving grace for that thing because the heads just do not flow. Stuart's asking, if they remade Mad Max, how would I do the Interceptor? So that's a Falcon. It's a 73 or 74 Ford Falcon XB Coupe is what they used. I would probably change things up a little bit, and I would use a 2015 or 2016 Hellcat and use that as the Interceptor. Oh, Hard Rock, what would be your original Mopar? The Super Bee? No, mine would be a 68 Roadrunner. 68 Roadrunner with a 440 and a 4-speed. Or automatic. That would be pretty good. Actually, you know what? The car that got away. 68 Roadrunner center console car with... that car was a 383 car. I'd have to go 440 for mine. And then I'd just build a hell of a max wedge setup for it. The max wedge, roller conversion, 580 lift on both sides, probably a 238 on the intake side, 244 on the exhaust. Would be the basic setup for that car. The Scamp was a 6-cylinder. Very cool. Yeah, the Scamp needed a 383 transplant. Yep. Arthur's asking, hello, question about a boost leak can cause a cylinder misfire on a turbo motor. No, not really. A boost leak, well, it depends on the boost leak, but it won't necessarily cause a misfire. It just means that you're venting to atmosphere. Matter of fact, this is on a supercharged car, but I used to vent the T-trim to keep from getting supercharger flutter on a Kuntz & Company 427. So no, a boost leak won't cause a misfire. On a turbo car, if you've got a misfire, a lot of times that's going to be, depends on the setup, but a lot of times that's going to be coil pack or spark plug related. You got too much of a gap there. Oh, Eric, yeah, he's talking about go after a survivor. Yes, don't get anything that's been touched. Go after something that is a true survivor car. Those are the ones that are still in, believe it or not, serviceable condition in most cases. Sam, on the V10 Magnums? Yeah, the 8.0s don't get a whole lot of love, but you do have to go turbo. Superchargers have a nasty habit of snapping the front ends off of those cars, or off of those engines, rather. And Beefy's asking, how noticeable will going from a 282 open diff to a 306 limited slip be only noticeable when launching the thing? No, you'll notice it on the, really notice it on the 2-3 shift under partial throttle. It'll just be a happier car in general under those conditions. You'll actually notice it, believe it or not, more under partial throttle than you will at wide open throttle. Ryan saying Dodge needs to give us a ball stud poly with 4 valves, small cubic inch, high displacement. I'm not worried about a ball stud. What I'm worried about, I just want dual overhead cams and about 5.5 liters, and about 12.5 to 1 compression, or 12 to 1 compression with direct and port injection, just like the Coyote. That's really what you need to make it work. But no, bye-bye 6.4 intake. I finally put my stock 5.7 intake back on. Let me know if you like that tune, man. But I'm happy to hear you've got the right intake on the 5.7. But with that, guys, we have gone over an hour. Make sure I haven't missed anybody in here. And I've got to get to work. But with that, guys, I want to thank Stuart. Thank you very much. I appreciate the contributions. Slack on the go, I appreciate that too, my friend. But guys, when it comes to NA combinations, stick with what works. A lot of guys will try their absolute very best to try to reinvent the wheel when it comes to these Hemis. Those of us that have been around this stuff for a long time, none of us are going to try to steer you wrong. Go with whatever the person is that's tuning your car, though. Go with the combinations that they're familiar with. That's how you get the best results. Don't try to throw anybody for a loop. Don't go too big. And I think you'll be very happy with the results that follow. But with that, guys, I got to wrap it up. Get out there and do something cool for somebody, because chances are they need it way more than you know. And we will catch you on the next one. Love each and every one of you guys, and we'll see you next time. Adios.